Hello and welcome to Marginal Support, where support is anything but marginal. I am your host, Andre Lindy, and today I have a pretty exciting guest. Was just chatting with him on a different medium. So, Vadi, it's great to have you on the show. Can you please give yourself a brief introduction?
Hi, Andre, thank you so much for having me. So, just a little bit about myself, and my story is going to go way back. I think not a lot of people know about me. Know this about me is my first job was actually in support right out of college, and I worked at Cital for around 6 months, which is now Foundever. And I got into that job just thinking that, hey, it's going to be an easy job. Let me just go in, make some quick money and ended up working there for around a bit more than 6 months. And I was absolutely surprised with how much skill and finesse it takes to really be in that seat. Um, and I think what struck out to me was there is a balance, you need to be balanced in terms of the amount of information you have and the amount of empathy you need to have in order to really communicate and explain that to people who on the other side, they don't know you, but they're expecting help from you. So did that for 6 months, went into technology. I was a software engineer, then into product, and spent around 15 years in the Bay Area working at startups and organizations of different sizes. Um, and my in 2018, I had the opportunity to come back into customer service. Worked at this company called as Spark Central, which got acquired by Hootsuite. Then worked at Ring Central after that for 6 years, building out the AI product portfolio. And then while I was at Ring Central, one of the things that struck out to me was we are talking about this a lot now, is the buzz around AI and how AI is a force multiplier for contact centers in many ways. And I think the thing that we don't talk about enough is how much of a human skill do you need now as compared to what you needed before? Because the expectations from you as a human agent is fundamentally different. And unfortunately, we don't think about and talk about it a lot. And the way that this is going to manifest is that it's going to be very hard to go and find these agents who are really good at their jobs. So what we do at Amalga now, which is the company that I founded, is we essentially level the playing field. We help organizations find great agents who are really skilled and really good at their jobs. And on the other end, we help customer support folks get really prepared for interviews. A surprising fact is there are more than 800,000 jobs globally for support as compared to software engineering, which is only 150,000. So there are 6 times or at least 5x more jobs in support. And unfortunately, we don't have good tools in order to make sure that these people who are looking for new opportunities in support get the right help. So we are essentially building on both sides and making sure that we empower these human agents, both from preparation, interviewing, all the way to performance on the job.
What do you see as being some of the biggest issues with people looking for a job right now? And more specifically, you have a lot of tools right now that are probably applying for jobs for people, AI tools. And so recruiters and companies are probably getting just absolutely hammered with applications right now. So how do you see job searchers try to get over that hurdle, and how does your platform help with that?
So there are a couple of things when it comes to job search. I think number one is you need to find the right opportunity, a spot where you feel that you can make the difference and where your skill is a good match. Number two, what do you do in order to shine on your application? So you need to understand what is your skill set, how's your resume showing up, and what do you think needs you need to add further in order to make sure that your application signs up. Your application stands out. So what we do with Amalga Candidate Prep is that we essentially guide people to say, look, this is your job description, this is your resume, these are where the gaps are. And if you don't fill these gaps, you are not going to be able to stand out. Like you said, in a pool of applicants, there are at least 1,000 people or 1,000 applicants for every single job these days. So that's number one. Number two is let's say you get a call, and when you get a call for an interview, the expectations are very different today than what they were 2 or 3 years ago. What people are looking for, or what hiring managers are looking for today, is the ability for you to problem solve. How do you think through a problem? Because you're not going to be doing, basic tier one stuff anymore. You have AI for that. And we know that AI is getting better and better and better. So at some point in time, you need to level up to tier two and tier three and beyond. So problem-solving capability is extremely important. How do you communicate when you're in that hot seat, when you're in the interview hot seat? How do you communicate? All of those things are extremely important. And what we do is not just help you out with your application, but once you get a call, you need to be ready with your interviews so that you really shine well. Because these opportunities, you're not going to get too many of these opportunities. So you better be well prepared. So we essentially help out candidates with both of these in order to make sure that they really do well in the interviews and they get the job.
With a lot of people right now, in the past, support people that just say, "Oh, I'm a good communicator. I'm a problem solver," right? But that doesn't translate to a resume. That doesn't translate to what your skills are. So when you've worked with people, what have you seen with people where they don't really know how to describe themselves on a resume? They may have skills, but they really don't know how to vocalize them.
Yeah, I think that's the number one problem that I see on the resumes is your resume does not accurately capture all of your strengths properly. And you have either not talked about it deep enough, or you have essentially completely, you have essentially just brushed over that. A good example is, if you are applying for a manager or someone, maybe a director or above job, what really needs to shine through in your application is the fact that you can mentor and be a good leader to your team members, but you also need to have show horizontal leadership, which means that you need to be also good partners to the people in the support team, in the engineering team, in the sales team, in the marketing team. And you might have done that, but if that doesn't show on your resume, you are not going to be standing out in a pool of applicants. So that needs to really come through in the resume. So what we do on Amalga Candidate Prep is that we guide you through to say, this is what your job requires. This is the next level of detail that they might be asking for that your application is not showing right now. You might want to include that. And we are not a resume preparation service. There are plenty of tools that really do that. What we focus on is to essentially make sure that, the best of the work that you have done really shines on your resume that overlaps really well for the job that you're applying for.
So, first question is, how long has your product been around, and do you have some success stories now you can share where you've helped people basically find their voice or help them speak to where they are successful? Because it sounds like a lot of people are good at some of these tasks, but they just don't know that they're good at these tasks.
Yeah, yeah, excellent question. So we have the candidate prep product has only been in the market for, I would say, less than a month. And we have right now around 120 users of the product. And we already have three applicants in three different parts of the world who essentially have gotten their next opportunity just out of using the product. And what the product does, like I said, is not just the resume and the application, but also the preparation. And what that means is when you're going in for an interview, you really need to understand this company through and through. um, let's say you're going for Boeing or Microsoft or Facebook, you need to kind of understand where this company is at in the journey. What are some of the levers that they're working on? How does it impact my job? And what are the things that I need to know before I say yes to this role? Uh, One of the candidates that use our tool, they had an interview at 2 p.m. and they got an offer at 5 p.m. The reason why they got that offer was essentially the interviewer telling to this candidate that I've never had someone be so prepared, before coming into an interview, and that showed up in how they presented themselves, in the kind of questions that they were asking, and suggestions that they had on how they would do things differently. So we are starting to see good success stories come out of this.
So for a product like this isn't something where you just wake up one day and say, "I'm going to create a company." You know, what was the genesis for you where you said, "I see a market fit," or "I see that there is a solution that's not being offered right now"? What was kind of your aha moment for when you wanted to create this company?
Yeah, so when I started out Amalga, essentially for me, the goal was connect great agents with great opportunities. That was essentially how we started out, and we still do that. Um, and the reason for doing that was essentially, you have companies that are sitting in different buckets. You have very large organizations where you have an in-house team and you have your, tied up with a BPO, um, and you have different motivations for each of these teams. You're tied up with a BPO because you want to follow the sun approach. You have in-house teams that you essentially have a higher bar to hire them. And then you have startups that essentially are starting out. They don't have a support team. They want to build a support team. They don't want to spend money going after a BPO because the quality can be hit and miss. So they are really looking to find great quality agents so they can keep the level of service pretty high. And as we were on that journey, what we found out was when we were matching these candidates to these opportunities, um, our threshold was very high. We are only looking at the top 1% of support agents who qualify to be matched to these opportunities. So the remaining 99%, I asked them the question, what is holding you guys back? And the question that the answer that they had for me was, we don't have good tools in order to prepare us for these interviews. So my next question was, okay, what other tools are you using? And it was Claude and ChatGPT. And the way that they were using these tools is they would take the job description, put that in Claude or ChatGPT, ask the tool to just give them some questions, and then they would practice through that. That is a surface level preparation. That is not a deep preparation that you need for going into these interviews. And I said, okay, let's just build a tool around that. So that's how we kind of created that tool.
Earlier during your introduction, you mentioned that you lived in the Bay Area for 15 years, I think. Was that right? Or you lived here for
Yep, still do.
how?
Yeah,
Oh, you still do?
yeah,
So,
yeah,
my question is, this basically is the tech hub of the world. I mean, at least I think it
yeah.
is. How has, being focused here, having experience in companies here, how has that shaped the way that you look at the product you're putting out and the candidates that you're talking to? Because if someone was not based here, maybe they're based, in the middle of the United States, even New York. New York has a lot of startups, but still, this is Silicon Valley. How has Silicon Valley changed the way your product operates?
Well, I think the way Silicon Valley has kind of changed in the way I personally operate, and that kind of translates into the product, is to be very focused on the truth. I think in order to build out great products or great products that solve real problem, you have to have a relentless approach to chasing the truth, an objective truth, not a truth that makes you feel warm and fuzzy, but an objective truth. Um, and that objective truth could come in different shapes and sizes. Um, my experience working in the contact center industry for the last 8 years has been to continuously put out products that are focused more on creating more revenue, that is most focused on revenue generation. And you're still focused on the customer, but the secondary goal or maybe the primary goal that you have is, hey, how do I put out a product that generates revenue? And in that case, you're not chasing the truth. You're essentially just chasing an arbitrary goal. And for me, it was very important for me to chase the truth. And the truth that I'm looking at, and I think we kind of all are looking at, um, both in our industry and around us, is AI is changing fundamentally the work that we do. And I'm not saying that it's going to take away customer support jobs, but it's going to change the nature of support jobs. And what does that mean for people who are going to be sitting in that seats? What kind of jobs are they going to do? What is the expectation out of them? And are they prepared, both this generation and the next generation, are they prepared the right way to really take on those jobs? So that's the truth that I'm kind of been chasing. And that's the reason why the products that we have built is essentially trying to find an answer to that truth. Second is essentially focusing on the quality. I'm personally never happy with the work that I put out. I'm constantly finding ways to kind of make it better and better and better. And I think that's the second thing that I essentially feel that, well, I wouldn't always say that it's just because of Silicon Valley, but I think there is this insane obsession with great product. And I think a good product combined with a good marketing and a sales strategy kind of solves all problems. So, I mean, that's how Silicon Valley specifically has kind of influenced in the work that I do and the kind of products that we build.
I I think a lot of people in support have a builder's mindset, because we're people that are always wanting to break something, put it back together. We want to find creative solutions. How have people with this builder mindset basically changed the way you're trying to up level people in support? Because I think a lot of people in support want to know the intricacies of how everything works, right? So how did that approach basically with support people in mind in general help shape your product?
I think, just to add to that a bit further, I think I firmly believe that people in support, they are creative. They want to break things because they want to fix it. But the overarching quality that people in support have is the ability to problem solve, to, look at problems from multiple different directions and to poke and nudge and constantly iterate and see what approach makes the most sense. Uh, and I think that's a quality that is overarching for people in support. And that I feel people who essentially have that do really well in support, along with other qualities like empathy. So, when you're building for that audience, you also have to kind of make sure that your product is inheriting that mindset. So when we essentially take candidates through what I call as interview rooms, these are not essentially questions that we're throwing out and asking people to answer it um, in a very transactional way. It's almost like you're really sitting and doing an actual support ticket. You're really talking to the customer. The AI is going to ask you a question, and then it's going to act like a customer. It's going to role play a customer, and it's going to challenge you, and it's going to see how you solve the problem. And I feel that is true interview-like experience. That is what you want to see on how your candidates, do they really do well in that scenario, or they really shine on the resume, but they really suck at their job. So I think that is what the product brings out.
This is a bit of a tangent to that, but you got me thinking when you said, okay, we're going to test people on how they do tickets. One of the biggest challenges that I've seen with support people when they come to any job is that they're trained, but what they learn is only about 5 or 10% of what they actually do in their job, right? How do you look at support and possibly maybe a future of your product or other products to try to ramp people up using AI to try to get them to answer real world questions before they actually start taking tickets?
Yeah, yeah, I feel that there are a few companies that are already tackling it, and we are tackling it too. And if you look at the journey of how a support person essentially gets into production, is there is an interview, they're hired, they're put into a training process, there is some form of evaluation, and then they are graduated into production. Now, the interesting fact is 20 years ago, when I was working as a customer service rep at Seidel, the way that we were evaluated was just based on this one phone call where our trainer was acting as a customer and we were talking on the phone with that person. And based on how we did in that conversation, they would decide, hey, do I push John Doe into production? Yes or no? And what I've realized that even after 20 years, that process has not changed much. The evaluation process is still the same. And it was a bit of a shock to me when I was talking to a lot of folks in support. I was like, how do you evaluate whether somebody is ready or not for production? Like, oh, we'll give them this test and that test, and we'll probably do a few shadow sessions before we decide how this person ready or not for production. And I feel that that preparation or that evaluation process is slowly changing, where you can now have AI-based role plays that are essentially simulating real situations. You can assess how your agents are responding to that, and you can have a very detailed evaluation just to measure, is this person ready, or is this person ready? Is this person capable enough to handle these conversations? And if you think about it, this kind of an evaluation is something that a lot of contact centers are doing 3 to 6 months after they push an agent into production. That is like many, many months too late. And now you're kind of looking back and you're trying to make sure that you're nudging them and pushing them and making sure that you can work with this person instead of throwing them out of the job. That I feel that whole process of quality, or what we call as QA in our world, you can essentially pull it ahead. You can do that before this person hits production. You can have that detailed evaluation and say, hey, I know John Doe does great on empathy, average on problem solving, and does really bad at closing. Let's improve on these areas before this person goes into production. And I think those things are now possible, which was, like I said, we were doing it the old school way.
Yeah, I remember my first support job. We had an academy that we went to, I think, for 8 weeks. And near the end, our mentor, this is back when we all had phones at our desk, would call our extension, and then we would role play. And then, like you said, that was pretty much it. You had final test you had to take, and then you were just dumped in the deep end. And then you were scrambling to find answers. So it really was. I think for a lot of people, even I said this to people, it was sink or swim. You get into the job, and either you're gonna love it or you're gonna hate it, and you're like, this is not for me at all. So I mean, if we can definitely prep people for the kind of jarring experience of taking these tickets, then I think they're probably going to enjoy the job more. But then they're going to be much more prepared, and the customers are going to have a better experience as well. So that leads me into a different question. Now that we see how AI is shaping how we interview, how we prepare, even how we train for our jobs, how do you see AI shaping future roles of support now? Because, like you said, a lot of these tier one tickets are going to go away. So, what do you see as the future of an entry level support job?
Great question. And I think we were kind of talking about it a little bit, earlier when you and I were chatting. Um, the role of your tier one agent is at some point of time, you would probably not need that tier one agent anymore. Why? Because your AI is going to be capable enough to handle those questions. And I know there are a lot of opinions about this. They're like, hey, this is a good, they will show you examples printed on a sheet of paper saying, look, AI is still not doing a great job. And sure, yeah, I agree with that today. But sooner or later, this technology is going to get really, really good. And it can kind of do all of those things that you want them to do. So your tier one at some level will be taken care of. So what that means is the people who are going to step into these roles, you would not be expecting them to do just basic triaging. You are expecting them to handle more meatier conversations. And you will probably also expect them to take on additional responsibilities. One of the things that AI has done is that it has made access to vibe coding and information to everyone now. Everyone can be a vibe coder. You can go on Replit, you can go on Lovable, you can build out an application by yourself. You can use Claude Code. There are so many tools that are out there. You can build out an application by yourself without really needing much of a software engineering background. So what that means is you will have agents who will come in with um, multiple skill sets. On one hand, they'll be very good at the job that they do, which is handling support tickets. On the other hand, they will essentially step up and say, hey, where else can I make a difference? what are the things that I can do within my team using AI that increases productivity or it saves time? One of those two things. And taking this a bit further, what that means is the vendors, the CCaaS vendors or uh, contact center vendors who are essentially selling these tools to these organizations, they are going to have a hard time, or they will also have to level up in terms of the problem that they're going to solve. Just think about this, right? Now you have agents who are coming in with additional skill sets who can build out a coaching tool in-house. They can probably build out an agent assist in-house. And they are probably much better at building those tools bespoke for that organization as compared to depending on a vendor. So if you can do all of these things in-house with really good guardrails, you really don't need to depend on external vendors to really supply these to you. So the kind of problems that these vendors are going to solve are also going to look much different than the ones that we're looking at today. I think today, if you look at the portfolio of most of these CCaaS vendors selling into contact centers, it's a basic CCaaS product. It's probably some kind of AI-based routing, AI-based analytics, AI QA, and agent assist. All of these things, I think today can be built in-house. So the level of talent that will come into support is going to be of, I would say, much higher quality than what we are looking at today. Um, you are going to be looking at agents who are coming in not just with the basic support capabilities, but also product and engineering capabilities. So I think it's going to be quite exciting.
I don't know if this would be an apt term for these people. You would almost say that some of these people might be software engineer light or product manager light, because now these people are going to be taking on multiple hats, right? They're going to be looking at the product, and in the past part, people have said, if only I had this tool, I could do my job a lot better. If only I had something to organize this data, I could do my job a lot better. But now people are going to have these tools, like you said, with Replit. If they have a little more storage, maybe Cursor, Lovable, where they can start to build these bespoke tools, and they know their systems better than anyone else. Because support knows the tool better than anyone else. So the way they're going to organize the data is going to be efficient. My question for you, though, is what concerns are we going to get into when we start to go into this kind of wild west where we have all these tools coming into an environment, and some of them are going to have good guardrails, some of them aren't going to have guardrails? Isn't it going to be a little worrying for companies when they have all these little add-ons or tools starting to pop up within their own environment?
Yeah, I mean, this is going back to our Web 2.0, right? So as if you were a CTO in the Web 2.0 days, uh, it was a headache to manage all of these applications and all of these different vendors because there were so many of them. And I think we're going to run into something similar now as well, where you essentially have all of these applications that are going to get built. You need to have strong governance into what makes a good product and how is it using data, how is it using the engineering systems. All of that needs to kind of be thought through. So um, that's the reason why you have AI ops. So you have DevOps, you have RevOps, and then you probably start seeing more internalized AI ops where their job is to make sure that you don't have a lot of these orphaned applications running around and kind of creating havoc. And people are not kind of duplicating work. Department A is not building a product that looks exactly like Department B because they probably have the same problems. But now because they have tools, they can do that. So you will need a governance at every organization where they essentially have clear guardrails on what makes it into quote unquote production and which one doesn't, and making sure that organizations have clear understanding on what they're building and why. And if you have built it, then I should be able to use it too. So it needs to be kind of thought through with that mindset. So I think the problems that we're going to start seeing now in terms of software development and application and enterprise deployment internally is kind of resonating the same issues that we used to see back in Web 2.0 days. So the problems are the same. I think the manifestation is a bit different. But I don't think this is a problem that we have not solved before. So we kind of have solved before. We have some frameworks, and we can kind of use it in order to, make sure that we don't create 1,000 applications. They all look the same with probably even the same names.
That kind of makes me think of like 90s video games where you would go on one level and the guy would be orange and you go to the next level and he's green. They're like, but they're two different enemies. It's kind of, it's really interesting that you talk about this basically new departments or new roles opening up with the way AI is happening. Since you are having basically your thumb on the pulse of jobs coming out, have you started to notice that there are maybe new job titles or new roles coming out with the changing landscape of technology?
I've started to see new roles come out, specifically within support. There are job titles which says software implementation specialist or something to that effect, where they are looking at people who coming in with that problem-solving mindset and with the ability to now build things um, instead of just doing the regular day support job. So the titles are starting, not just the titles, but even the job descriptions are now starting to sound in support. They're starting to sound more like product manager job descriptions. Your job is to kind of look at 15 different problems within the organization, within your team, stack rank them. Okay, and then also go build products or applications to really solve those things. And then evangelize internally within the organization and talk about what you have built and why you have built it. All of these, the job descriptions are completely changing uh, with these newer job titles that are coming out. Albeit, I'm not seeing a lot of them, but I'm starting to see some of them. And the interesting fact is there are these in-house teams that are essentially pushing the envelope in essentially putting out these job titles and hiring for these roles. So you have in-house teams and you have BPO teams. And BPO teams or BPO organizations, they are still behind in this evolution. I think they are still living in a world where they feel that throwing bodies at an account is the way to make revenue. And they're still not caught up to the fact that, hey, these jobs themselves are changing. So the kind of people that we need to hire is going to be very different. But it has not hit the BPOs yet. I think it's the in-house teams are essentially now pushing the envelope and starting to hire these roles, but not there, there are not many of them. But I think at least in the next year or so, I'll probably see a lot more of these roles than the ones that exist today.
So the way I saw support basically when I was doing support, it was always go stay in the corner, go solve the problems, but we don't really want to see you. What I feel right now is kind of a glow up time for people in
Yeah.
CX. One, we never had the term CX in the past. That in itself is a bit of better representation for us. It used to be just customer support, customer success, but now that you are putting everything to customer experience, it's giving a better branding, it's a better name. But now also you're having these roles. What are your thoughts on basically people in the CX space now garnering more respect and more attention because we are the people that are doing these fundamental roles with how AI is coming up in the industry.
Yeah. I mean, interesting question, right? So customer support historically, it's been a catch-all department, right? If something goes wrong, no customer calls in, or most of the time customers don't call in because they love your product. They're calling in because something has gone wrong. So you are essentially the catch-all. You are there to arrest the problem, solve it, and make sure that this customer doesn't churn or they don't face a problem again. And unfortunately, the systems that we had, because you're having these conversations at massive, massive scale, the software systems were not able to catch up to that volume. So the kind of insights that they would deliver would be very nominal, would be very basic. So what we essentially fell back on was looking at support as a cost center. And when you think about anything as a cost center, you're tracking a bunch of basic metrics, you're tracking how much you're paying these people, because it's a cost center. You want to keep your cost as down as possible. What has happened now um, in the last, I would say in the last 3 years-ish, is because you have so much opportunity, you have so much data, and you have tools to kind of extract that data and deliver insights from it. There is this renaissance opportunity for support to number one be looked at as CX, which it is CX, right? If you think about the span of customers' experience, support is an integral part of that. If your support sucks, your customers will probably leave, not right away, but eventually they will leave. So, you essentially have this opportunity now for support folks to really bring forward insights and say, hey, you release product A, this is what your customers are saying. These are the support tickets that we're seeing. These are the issues that your customers are facing with this particular product. And now you have this opportunity to come in with those insights as opposed to just reporting on metrics. And I feel that's a fundamental shift. And now I think what will happen, just to take it further, what will happen, going back to what we just spoke about, is you will have these support teams now also bring down the cost because you're going to be able to build a lot of these tools in-house. So you have insights that you will deliver, plus you're building out your own things. So you don't have to depend on external vendors. You are in charge of your own destiny. You are going to bring down cost and you are going to elevate the experience that your customers are going to get, plus the insights that you can supply to the rest of the organization. So everybody else is now going to look at support and say, hey, what can we learn about the customer that we don't get from our sources? And they are going to look at support and say, hey, what are you learning? Teach us about what you're learning. Tell us about what you're learning so that then we can make better products and we can, make sure that the customers walk away happy. So I feel that there is this synergistic role that support has now, not just being a part of CX, but also as being a thought partner for the rest of the organization.
That is a very full answer, but I appreciate it. It's a very great answer, and I think support does have a great part of our future. Um, so we are reaching near our time today. I really enjoyed our conversation, but I always like to end an episode. I used to say this phrase when I would end episodes, but now I ask guests their thoughts on it. So I'm going to ask you this now. The phrase I always say is support isn't just a job, support is a mindset. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think if you are a product-based organization or even a service-based organization, you always want to make sure that your customers are getting the best experience possible. And what that means is whatever, if they buy your product or if they buy your service, it needs to work. It needs to work really, really well. But we are all human. We are imperfect, which means that things will break. And if things break, you will need to pick up the phone line and talk to someone. And what that means is your customer support is essentially, even though it's a catch-all, it's a very integral part of making sure that your customer stays with you. And if you're sitting in that seat, you need to have this mentality of not just problem solving and empathy, but also be very human at the same time. Have that humility and have the patience to kind of make sure that you're not letting your emotions get the best of you, at the same time getting to a great outcome. And that's a mentality not a lot of people have. I've seen people break down in high pressure moments, but then you look at someone in support who does this day in and day out, and then there is a lot that you can learn from it. And once you learn that mindset, I think you can apply it at any part of your job and any part of your life. So I feel that it's not just a job, it's a mindset. There is a lot to learn from people who do this day in and day out. And I personally, having seen and done this job up close and personally, um, I have a lot of respect for them. So I kind of feel that it's a mindset, and you need to live that mindset day in and day out. It's a hard job to do, and unless until you live that mindset, you would not be very good at it.
That's an excellent answer, and I definitely agree. The way that I approach things in my daily life have been shaped by how I've done jobs in support. Sometimes that does anger people because I can be a little analytical and answer questions, but it definitely shapes who you are. So, Vadi, it was an absolute pleasure having you on today. Thank you, and we will see you around later.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Andre. Pleasure. Take
All right.
care.